And here's the big challenge, the hardest thing. It's coming up with an equation when you're only given information. You're not given a graph. You're given not really given a table of values, though kind of you are. You're just given some sentences. And the question is, how do you go from these sentences here to an equation to find out, in this case, Ferd's earnings at any point in time? Okay, after any amount of sales. So we know that he earns $10 when he sells 80, and he earns $11 when he serves 100. Well, what if, and you can see by question G here, what if he sells 140? What's his earning? Okay, and so that's this question, and it's a tough one. But let's get started, and you'll see this is your biggest challenge of the day. So graph the relationship. So we're going to graph it, and I have everything written down here. And what does each variable, which variable is independent? And that's a tough question in and of itself. The independent variable is got to be the sales, and that's because his earnings depend on his sales. His sales don't depend on his earnings. It goes, you figure out how much he earns based on how much he sells. So I put sales on the x-axis because that's the independent variable, and the dependent variable is the earnings. Okay? So the amount he earns depends on how much he sells. Part B asks us to find the rate of change. So I made a little triangle. I guess I should explain how I came up with the graph. So here's my sales. Just looking at the numbers that I have, that's a sales, $80, and that's a sales. That's how much he's selling, right? So I put that, I made my axis from 0 to 150. Okay, just because it worked, and those kind of gets the numbers involved that I wanted. And over on the y-axis then, between 10 and 11 are the two I'm given, but I made the axis start at 0, 5, 10, 15. Okay? And the 2 points, the two big red dots here, that was the first thing that I did because I knew one of my data points. My first data point was $10 earnings, which is the y, and 80, which is my x. So I came across to 80, right, and 10, and I made a dot. That was the first thing I did to graph this. The second thing I did was take the second point, which told me that he earns $100, when he sells $100, he earns $11. Okay, so I found that point. From there, I made just this line, this black line right here, to be the graph. And notice I had it stop here because he's not going to have negative sales. So I made it stop right there. Although sometimes you make the line go on forever in each direction, but I actually stopped that one on purpose. Okay? Part B asks us to find the slope, or the rate of change. And so to do that, I made my little triangle, I did rise over run. So in this case, the rise goes from, I took the 2 points I had, so the rise is from 10 to 11, so it's 1. The run went from 80 to 100, which is 20, right? It went over $20 in sales. So his rise is 1, and that's 1 over 20, which is 0.05. You put that in your calculator, which is $0.05. It means he earns $0.05 for every dollar of sales he makes. Okay? And you can put it this way. He earns 5 cents on every dollar because $0.05 is 5 cents. And that's, in kind of a very common way to express someone's sales. He earns 5 cents on the dollar. So he sells $100. He gets 5 cents on each one. He'll make $50, not $50, $5. Okay? Anyway. And that's just, does that make sense? Well, not exactly, because he gets his fixed rate. So this line, see how it continues back? It doesn't go through 0, 0. That makes sense because it says that he makes a base wage. Okay? Because of his base wage, the base wage is represented by this. Okay? So, and that is, see that we talked about what it represents. D is what is the y-intercept. So the y-intercept is about 550, I figure. So that's 5, that's 6, so it's about 550. Maybe I'm off by a bit, but so his y-intercept is, and that's his base pay. That's his starting pay. If he makes $0 in sales, he still makes $5.50, no matter what. Okay? And then he earns 5 cents on the dollar after that. I said it appears to be 550 because you're just reading it off the graph. It's not going to be perfect, but based on what we see, it looks like about 550. Part E says, what does it represent? We said that. Create an equation. Here we go. So his equation, we'll say E is his earnings and S is his sales. Okay, so his earnings are going to be the 550, his base pay, plus the rate of change times whatever's on this axis, which is S. Okay, so he earns 550 no matter what, plus 5 cents on every dollar of sales. And in part E, it asks us to find how much he earns if he sells $140 worth of glasses. So if S is 140, you just substitute it into the equation. 550 plus 0.05 times, right here, goes the S, 140. Or, I wrote those backwards, but, and it works out to 1250. And you can kind of look at the graph again. Does that number make sense? Is it a reasonable answer? You come up to the graph and you go, okay, when he earns 140 is right here. My graph makes it look closer to $13, but it's certainly in the neighborhood. And like I say, the graphs are a little inaccurate. Just inherently when you draw your graph, the thickness of your pencil and such are going to make small mistakes. But I'm definitely in the right neighborhood. So I'm going to say, yep, I got a good answer there and feel good about that. All right, so try a few questions on your own, and that's it for today.